Hi, I'm Mike Franzone, and welcome to Mike Franzone Ministries. Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be looking at a series entitled Christianity, Politics, and Preachers. We're going to be answering some questions like, is it a sin for Christians not to vote? Should Christians be involved in politics? If so, how involved should a Christian be in politics? What is our responsibility as believers to our government, to the political process, to America itself? Should Christians be part of a government even if it's corrupt? And what about pastors and ministers and Christian leaders? Should they speak on political issues from the pulpit, online, on Facebook? I mean, at least maybe moral issues, right? How about separation of church and state? What does it actually mean? And is this in the Constitution? Is it a sin if we don't vote as believers? So we're going to look at these issues over the next 3 weeks. I think next week we're going to be looking at preachers and politics as well. Today I want to look at that. Is it a sin if we don't vote as believers? And what responsibility do we have, based on the Bible, to our government, to the political machine, to the Constitution, and all the above? I'm going to try to touch on a lot of issues today, because today is number one, first in a series. And if you look below when you're on YouTube, I'm going to put some notes there at the bottom, some of the scriptures we'll be looking at today. And for instance, let me just go ahead and read some of the passages to you right now. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 1 and 2. Therefore, I exhort first of all that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for all kings and all who are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and reverence. So we have a responsibility to pray for our leaders, even leaders in the government, even leaders who we don't even agree with. Now look at 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13 through 15. Let me turn my Bible there. 1 Peter chapter 2. Here it is, beginning in verse 13. Therefore submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme, or to the governors, or to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. So Christians are mandated and commanded to be good citizens. Now here's a very familiar passage, the book of Romans. You'll all know this. Now I won't get in depth today with this, but I think later in the series I want to break this down a little bit, but I'm going to read it to you. Romans chapter 13. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God. Those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. So it tells us right here, when you disobey, when you're doing evil or breaking the law, do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise of the same. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister and avenger to execute wrath on him who persists or practices evil. Therefore, you must be subject not only because of wrath, but for also conscience sake. For because of this, you also pay taxes. For they are God's ministers, attending continually to this very thing. Render therefore to all their due taxes, to whom taxes are due, custom to whom customs are due, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. Now I'm going to go to the book of Proverbs right now. And by the way, the Bible is filled with scriptures like this. We're going to go to, here it is, Proverbs chapter 8, verse 15 and 16. By me kings reign, and rulers decree justice. By me princes rule, and nobles. Over to the book of Psalms. Last verse we'll look at. All these will be in underneath the YouTube that you'll be hopefully clicking on here really soon. Psalms 33:12. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people he has chosen as his inheritance. You know Joseph and Daniel David were all leaders politically and spiritually as well. And all of them affected the government as well. And that'll be another message for next week. But you remember Matthew 22:21? Render the things that are Caesar's and the things that are God's. Let me just say it. If you don't get involved with your government somehow, just at least by voting or praying, you're not rendering to Caesar the things that are Caesar. I think it's ridiculous, and please don't miss this. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to think that God would ordain human government and tell his people to stay out of it. I know only God is the judge. But if you don't vote, if you don't inform yourself, if you don't speak out, if you don't pray, I believe that you're disobeying God. So, if you never vote as a Christian, as a believer, if you never get involved, if you never speak out, and if you never pray, where does that leave the country, the United States of America? It leaves it in a great big mess. The Christian worldview speaks of all areas of life, and that's including political engagements. And the decisions made by the government and by the people we elect have a substantial impact on people, and yes, especially religious people. Augustine wrote many years ago that the believers are citizens of the city of God, but on this side of eternity, we belong to the city of man. Therefore, we must be good Christians, but we also must be good citizens as well. Now, I can hear the lament, right? Oh, but politics is such a dirty business. Yes, sadly, it has become a dirty business in many, many circles. But maybe it's because believers need to vote. Maybe it's because believers need to get informed and involved. Maybe it's because believers need to speak out more. Maybe it's because believers need to pray more. And maybe it's because believers need to run for office. And we have someone here locally that is a strong Christian, goes to my daughter's church, and running for mayor in one of our local cities. And we're praying and we're hoping that he will win. He's getting involved. And he has the Christian worldview. If you and I don't get involved, if you and I don't vote and don't pray and don't get informed, and maybe not even run for office, we will create a vacuum. And that vacuum will be filled by vicious, fascist, Marxist, progressive, socialists, and people who hate America and people who hate Christianity. I know our government needs a moral revolution. And let me just say this to my believers out there, to my Christian friends. If you can't stand against the murder of millions of babies every year, then what in the world can you stand against? And just taking that one issue alone, what can you stand against? So here's the big question today. Can you and I make a difference? Yes, we can. I want to give you two recent examples, and I'm sure there's more examples we can look at. Let me just give you two. 2012 presidential election. There was King Obama versus droopy Mitt Romney. Millions of Christians, millions of evangelicals did not even vote. And what did we get? We got no hope, and you can keep the change. Example number two, 2016 presidential election. A record number of Christians / evangelicals voted. Almost all of them voted for President Trump. And we dodged a bullet called Hillary. Everything we voted for, we're actually getting. We wanted a pro-life president. We got it. We wanted lower taxes. We got it. We want a booming economy. We got it, notwithstanding the virus, and that had nothing to do with our president. We got lower taxes, a booming economy. We got wonderful relations with Israel. We got a stronger military. We got record number unemployment for blacks and whites and Latinos and women and teens. We building a wall that protects our borders, because if you don't have border protection, if everyone and their mother can just come in, then you don't even have a country. If you remove the borders, you don't have a country. We got all of those things because you and I went out and voted. You can make a difference. And we got a president who's cleaning up the dirty, nasty, muddy, messy swamp. The deep state hates him. The people love him. I mean, to the deep state, he's an alien life form, all right, as far as they're concerned. But the people love him. My ultimate hope is in God. I know politicians are not perfect. I know no person is perfect. And I know only Jesus Christ can change the heart. Only Jesus Christ can change society. Only Jesus Christ can change America. I want you to know that I'm a Christian first. I'm a conservative second. I'm a Republican third. Psalm 33:12. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Blessed is the nation whose God is boss, whose God is worshipped, whose God is obeyed, whose God is honored. Next Sunday, I want to look at a brief history of preachers in politics. I want to go back next week to the very beginning, to the Revolutionary War, to our founding fathers, and to the preachers who were preaching in the pulpits at those days. And we want to look at some of that, and maybe we'll bring it up a little bit to some of our modern times as well. But preachers in politics. Is it all right for a preacher to preach about political issues from the pulpit, or even speak out his mind, all right? And this is beside moral issues as well. You see, my friend, what we do now can affect a generation, how we vote, how we pray, how we get involved, how we speak out, is not only for us today, but for our children and our grandchildren and their children, and it goes on for many, many generations. You and I can make a difference. All right, thank you. Hey, thank you so much for joining with me today. Just remember to like and subscribe if you're not part of Mike Franzo Ministries here on YouTube. And remember, next week, you got to tune in. We're coming out every Sunday morning for the next 3 weeks. All right, God bless. See you next time.